Shalom, everyone. We're going to begin our storytelling in just a couple minutes. So if you need the restroom, you want to grab another beverage, this is a good time to do that.
All right, everyone, we're going to get started. Thank you all for being here. Woo! We have some wonderful storytellers, and a couple things before we get started. One is that storytelling is partially the job of the person up here, but it's also your job. You are co-creating the story with the speaker. So you can be a great audience by giving your love and your eye contact and breathing and being supportive of people in your community doing something super brave. So that's the first thing. It's co-creation. We're working together. And the other thing is there is a slight echo on this mic, so just be prepared for that when you get up here. The other piece is that I've been thinking lately how everyone reads stories to children. It's so important to read to kids and tell stories to kids. But I think people forget how important it is to tell stories to our adults as well, and stories to our seniors, and to have adults tell stories to other adults. I'm a big fan of adult storytelling. I don't mean like adult storytelling, you know what I mean? Like adult story. Yeah, thank you. So I think it's wonderful. I think we need stories at all times in our lives. So I'll be emceeing tonight, which means I'll sort of be a palate cleanser between each story. You'll hear a story that will completely transport you and tell you all about someone's life. I'll come back, bring us to zero, and then a new person will come up and take us into a complete new space. So our first storyteller is Hinda Block. Come on up, Hinda. All right, and if there's anything you need with the space, just set it up the way you would like it.
The name of my story is Still, My Name is Hinda. It is September. It's very warm on the top floor in their tenement apartment at 374 Broadway. Gucha grips the black vinyl folder secured with a sturdy buckle. It holds her daughter Hinda's birth certificate among their recent immigration papers and an important letter. Come, Hindala. It's time to go to your new school. Hinda's eyes shine with the endearment her mother has added to her name. She loves being called Hinda. She is dressed in a white, starched pinafore. A little pocketbook with a metal chain swings from her wrist. Hinda's blonde bottle curls bounce as she skips ahead of her mother along Hickory Street. It is lined with real houses and many trees, not like the building with a liquor store on the street level where she lives. Hinda wears the last pair of shoes her father made before they left Germany. The shoes were too big when she first tried them on, the leather strap cinched to the first hole. Now her toes are cramped, but today she doesn't even notice. This is the day she's been waiting for, a new school. Hinda liked the school she left a few months ago. The two nice teachers and her friends in the kindergarten room. The children liked Fehrenwald Displaced Persons Camp. Many children were born there. It was their home, the only one they knew, but not their parents. Their lives had been altered forever. Public School 47 is a few blocks away, and Gucha quickens her step to take her daughter's hand as they approach the tall brick school building. Hinda counts the 8 steps as she walks up the stairs to the front door. The school registrar is seated behind a gray metal desk. Gucha stands before him, her sturdy body upright, her short chestnut hair neatly arranged. She holds Hinda's hand, the sleeveless starched pinafore revealing the child's slender, pale arms. I am Mr. Edgars. Do you have a document that shows your name and your address, madam? My name is Gucha Martin. She hands a notarized sheet to the school registrar. It states her name and address. Her landlord, Arthur Hardwick, the African-American owner of the building, drafted the letter for her. He is fond of Gucha, Aaron, and their curious little girl, Hinda. Every week, Gucha sweeps and mops the wide landings leading to the top floor as the dirt tenants track up the stairs bothers her. And so, the landlord, Mr. Hardwick, allows Gucha and Aaron to keep 2 boarders in the apartment. This helps with the rent. The couple starts saving for their daughter and for their future. The man in the blue suit and matching tie peers at Gucha. She knows her English is not good, but she learned a bit of English in Fehrenwald, a service for those who dreamt of belonging in America, one of the many interim sites for the displaced. There were several 100,000 Jews who had no place that accepted them after World War II ended. They were stateless, unwanted, unsafe. They were among the She'arit HaPlita, surviving remnants, about 75,000 scattered in displaced persons camps in Germany alone. In Buffalo, New York, where they immigrated, Gucha goes to night school to learn English. It is hard for Aaron, who works long hours as a shipping clerk in Kaufman's bakery, but Gucha is hungry to learn, and so is the little girl standing next to her. The registrar points to Hinda. I need to see her paperwork. Gucha hands him Hinda's birth certificate. It is written in German. I help Mr. Ergers? He shakes his head. No, thank you. What does that say? Hind? Gucha gently squeezes Hinda's hand. She looks at this man who holds power over her. This is the day she has told her daughter she'd be accepted to this new school. She looks straight at him. My girl, her name, Hinda. We do not have girls named Hinda in American schools. He says, his pen aimed at the little girl standing before him. On the kindergarten form, I'm changing her name to Hilda, Hilda. Do you understand? This is for her own good. I see she will be 6 in January. I could put your daughter into first grade, but she does not speak a word of English that I have heard, and so I will put her in kindergarten. Hinda looks at the floor, looks at the pretty brown shoes that now pinch her toes. She recognizes the word kindergarten. She was in kindergarten in Fahrenwald. She learned numbers in Yiddish and Hebrew, songs in Hebrew, Jewish holidays. She could recite poems about birds and snow. They read stories about a place called Eretz Yisrael, where some of the children in her class have already gone to live. And she had learned some English since they had arrived in Buffalo, New York, since May 1951, enough to understand that the man is not saying her name right. But she wants to learn. She wants to go to school, to be with children. She misses her friends, Zisela, Freda, and Surala. His fountain pen points at Hinda, who is now suddenly Hilda. You bring Hilda back to kindergarten, he says. Kindergarten, Hinda understands that word and other English words. Her mother understands. Gucha has permission to bring her daughter back to an American school. The registrar stands. He reaches across the desk and hands Gucha a form. Can you read at the bottom where it tells you when to bring Hilda back to public school 47? Gucha searches for the last line. Yes, she says, I read. It says school begin September 7, 1951. Start 8 minutes and 30 minutes. Good, he says. You understand, you may leave, as his fingers unfold towards the door. Gucha leads Hinda out of the office, down the steps, into the very warm, sunny September afternoon. Mama, mein Name ist nicht Hilda. Mommy, my name is not Hilda. Verwusst hat nicht lieb Hinda. Why doesn't he like Hinda? Her bottle curls have unwound. The starch pinafore relents against her bare legs. Hinda Lagucha says, you heard, yes? Mr. Edgar said you'll be a student in the American school. In kindergarten again. He doesn't like me. I'm not smart. Hindala, you are. You understand so much. Sometimes, too much. But we're in America, and you will get used to your new name, Hilda. With her new wrong name, Hilda and her mother walk home. But no, Hinda never did get used to that name and longed to be Hinda for a very long time.
Hinda, that was so beautiful. Thank you for starting this off. We really appreciate it. That was spectacular. All right. I love that story is in the third person. When she brought that in right away, we really love that. Isn't that amazing? She's a great writer. All right, up next we have Julie Sharp.
I guess. Oops. This working? Yep. So, some of you who were at the Shiva from my mother-in-law heard part of this. This is about a relationship that really could have been a disaster. I was, in her eyes, a previously divorced liberal Jewish girl from Long Island, which was not exactly the daughter-in-law that my racist, homophobic, anti-Semitic, Southern Baptist mother-in-law in Oklahoma had hoped for. But, that's what she got. And Oklahoma was really quite foreign. When I met Steve, I grew up in the New York area. I had met people from all over the world, but I had never met anyone from Oklahoma. I said, "Where are you from?" He said, "Oklahoma." And I'm like, "Oklahoma? Are you kidding?" But that was the case. And my mother-in-law and father-in-law were not thrilled, to say the least. And she was more accepting than her husband, but things could have been really horrendous. But never being one to pass up a challenge, I decided that she was still Steve's mother, the grandmother of future children, and that I was going to do my best to have a decent relationship. And I think she felt she had no choice, so she began making an effort to do the same. On my first visit to Oklahoma, I have to say I felt like Woody Allen visiting Annie Hall's family, where he was the Hasid sitting at the table with all of them. It was really quite strange, but what do? This is the way it is. So I thought, I have to find something that we have in common. And luckily, I had a poodle. And my mother-in-law loved poodles. And she had, over the years, Lily and someone else, and then Sherry, and I had Sadie and Marv and Olive and Edith, and mine are about this big, and hers are about that big. So all of her poodles together were about half the size of one of mine, but it didn't matter. I loved poodles, and so that was a plus. I wasn't like totally horrible. I thought, food is always a good thing to connect people. So I took an interest in things she would cook. Some were more successful, in my opinion, than others, but some of the things were standouts that I had never had before, like pimento cheese, which is not a thing we eat here. And it's this sandwich stuff made with cheddar cheese and pimentos and pecans and a little bit of mayonnaise. What else is in it? Anything else in it? And some hot sauce. And it's really quite delicious. I mean, it makes wonderful sandwiches. And I'm like, gee, why haven't I heard of this stuff before? And she also made banana chocolate coconut cream pie, which my kids were always asking for Thanksgiving. You know, it was like, well, can you make grandma's banana chocolate coconut cream pie? And Cordia, is my mother-in-law's name, was a church organist for, about 60 years? And for years, she was at the First Baptist Church in Okmulgee. And whenever we were there, I made a point of dressing up the kids and all of us going to church with her because I didn't want to be disrespectful. And she was really proud to show off her family because nobody had to know that we were Jewish. But, you know, it was fine. You know, there were times that we heard some very strange things at church that I thought maybe I should get up and leave, but out of respect for her, I chose not to. My mother-in-law decided, she realized that I like projects. I like fixing things. So what she started doing was when we'd go to Oklahoma, she would say, you know, we'd get to the house and she would say to me, oh, I have something for you to do. And I'd say, oh, you know, what's that? So one time it was, can you fix the sewing machine? So I fixed the sewing machine. And can you fix the printer? Fix the printer. Then one day, as soon as they got us at the airport, she says, I have a surprise for you. And I said, what's that? And she had bought this wall unit that had to be assembled. We get to the house, and there's this box upstairs in her room, and I spent the next few days assembling the wall unit. But I think it was a way for her to show me that she knew I liked doing this stuff, and so she had things for me to do. One point that really kind of stood out, and I think kind of shifted things a bit, we had gone together to my niece's college graduation and another cousin's bridal shower in Oklahoma City. And when we were driving home, there's just this one highway that goes like from Oklahoma City to Okmulgee, and there was an overturned tractor trailer. And we were stuck, just the two of us, in this car for hours. And much to my surprise, she started sharing with me about the difficult childhood she had had with an abusive father, and, you know, and I was very shocked that she had opened up in this way. And after her husband died, Steve's dad, she was very lonely. And, you know, we would say to her, maybe you should reach out to the woman next door, or, you know, get to know this one or that one. Nothing was really working, and I think she was interested in meeting a guy. So, you know, but she lived in a small town, and so she knew everybody in the town. And so I suggested online dating. So, again, I was surprised, and she was, well, you know, why don't I try that? And so I looked around to see what might be best for someone in their 80s, and it seemed that Match.com actually was better for seniors than some of the only senior dating sites. So I told her how to set up a profile, and then she had me look at it. And I was very surprised to see that she had lied about her age and about, she said she had a college degree. So I said to her, Mom, I don't think you really have to lie about your age. I mean, she was an extremely attractive woman and really well put together. She looked great sort of all the time. I said, what someone will see if you put down your 80 or 82, however old she was, I said, and they look at your picture, they're going to think, whoa, she looks great. So, I would, put your age. And I said, out there, there are a lot of people of your generation who don't have college degrees. So, a lot of the men, it's really a very male-dominated culture, particularly in fundamentalist churches. I said, so if the majority of men don't have degrees and you say you have a degree, you're going to eliminate all of them from the interested parties. So she said, oh, I didn't think about that, and she changed her profile. And sure enough, she started getting calls from this one guy who she actually had a phone relationship with for quite a while, but they never managed to get together because he lived a couple hours away, and it really was not safe for either of them to drive even halfway in the heat in Oklahoma in the summer. But then she met Harry, and Harry lived in Tulsa. It was only about 45 minutes away. And she, was telling us she met this guy, Harry, and then she told us, well, there's also Pete. And we're like, well, who's Pete? And we soon found out when we went for what I think of as the date weekend. And we get to Oklahoma, and Friday night, Harry came over for dinner. Saturday, we had lunch with Pete. Sunday evening, we went to Harry's church and then out for ice cream. And on Monday night, Pete came for a birthday dinner. Each of these events, they would sit in the back seat and we would drive, and each one ended with a peck on the cheek and some hand holding. And I'm like, I can't believe this, One guy one day, one guy another. Ended up, Steve and I both liked Pete a lot better. He had a great sense of humor, and she ended up marrying Pete on his 90th birthday, and she was 85 at the time, and we were there helping out. I ended up catering the wedding, which was an experience. But I took her. She had never had a manicure, and so I took her with her outfit to the manicure place in Walmart, and they matched nail polish to her dress, and then, we were there for the wedding, and that night we stayed in a hotel rather than at Pete's house where we normally would have stayed, so they could have their honeymoon time alone. And I do have to say, during the dating period, we had given her some opera tickets, the live in HD Met Opera things, and we said, well, why don't you, Pete was also very interested in classical music. We said, why don't you go with Pete, and, you could stay over, and Pete had a big house. We said you could stay over at Pete's after the opera because it ended late. And they looked at us like we had three heads and said, what would the neighbors say? Anyway, after Pete's death, they were married 5 years. After he died, we had an open house to thank all the relatives and friends who had been so helpful to her. And here I was kind of pushing my attitudes on her a bit, because one of the people who had been most helpful to her was Beverly, who was one of Pete's nieces. And she was like Saint Beverly, because she took her to doctor's appointments and was just calling her almost every day. And my mother-in-law says to me, I said, are Beverly and Sid coming? And she says, well, Beverly's daughter and these are my mother-in-law's words, not mine, and her so-called wife are here. And I said, oh, so are they going to come? And she said, well, I don't know. And I said, and what do you mean so-called? And she said, well, you know. And I said, well, if she's her wife, she's her wife. That wasn't going anywhere. So I am a troublemaker. I go and call Beverly. And I get her answering machine. And I said, Beverly, Cordia, just mentioned that Adrian's here with her wife, and I want you to know we would love to have them at the party, that they are very welcome. And I said, just, feel free to come. And about a half hour later, I get a call from Beverly, and she is in tears, because she is also from this fundamentalist background. And she said this was the first time anyone had referred to Adrian's wife as her wife, and that she had never been able to say that to anyone. And she was so grateful for the invitation, and they ended up coming. And then we all went back to their house for Christmas the next day, because she wanted people there who would be okay with her daughter and her wife. And my mother-in-law was a bit reluctant, but she did come, and it ended up that they had gotten married in Connecticut, because it was one of the only 2 states where they could get married, and they got married in Ridgefield, where we had gotten married. So my mother-in-law was, well, okay, that's like a connection that, she could relate in some way. So anyway, I will start wrapping this up, but she was always a meticulous dresser. And Steve and his brother when she moved to an assisted living facility, had given away everything but comfortable clothes. And when she died, I knew this woman would not want to be buried in a sweatsuit. So the last thing that I did for her was we went to the store. Steve and I went to the store, and I got her a beautiful dress and a necklace and earrings, and gave it to the guy at the funeral home and asked him, do you have anyone who can do hair and makeup? And he did, and she looked not like an older woman who really had declined significantly in the last couple of years. She looked absolutely beautiful, and although I'm not one who's really into looking at dead bodies, it really was wonderful. And everyone looked at her and said she would be so pleased. And so, this could have gone very differently, and I'm very happy that it went the way it did.
One of my favorite things about Julie's story is the idea that this mother-in-law now thinks that Jewish women fix wall units. And it's a new stereotype that I'd never heard before. So up next, we have one of our very own, Stephanie Schwartz.
Maybe a little too loud. Now it's my height. All right, so this story is called The Date That Went Very Wrong. So probably about 12 years ago, living in Philadelphia, I got myself all ready and dressed and to go out to a speed dating event. So I'm dressed in my clothes to emphasize my beautiful eyes. I'm going to this place. I sit, I sign in. They give you a name tag, but it's not with your name on it. It has a number on it. And so the men get their numbers, the women get their numbers, and the women sit at the tables and the men have to rotate. So we get put at a table, and every 3 minutes a new person comes to sit down with you, and you get a card where you get to score how the date went. And then at the end, you turn that card in, and hopefully you and maybe the person that sat across from you that you enjoyed the conversation match up, and you get an email later that night that says, oh, you and blah, blah, blah matched up, and then you start to have the conversation. So you go into this excited that you're going to meet someone, and then you sit through 10 or more little dates, some that are really dreadful and some that 3 minutes, like you're like, oh, I could keep talking with this person. So, but the problem is you have to score really quickly, right? Because the next person's coming in with bell rings, so they sit down, you got to jot your notes down and whatever. So I get home from the event. I met like 2 or 3 guys that I was like maybe interested that I would be willing to go on a date with. Get the email. I see I match with two of the guys. And then an email a little bit later comes in, and it's from this guy, David, saying, I'd love to set up a date. And so I said, okay, that sounds great. We set up a date to go out to dinner at this restaurant not far from my house. So a few days later, again, I get myself all schmanced up. I have the dress, the clothing on. It makes my eyes sparkle. I put on my favorite perfume. I head out to the restaurant. I park my car. I walk up to the door. He's sitting on a bench outside. I stop and pause for a second because David is not who I thought David was supposed to be. So David, I realized later that I had marked all my numbers one rung down on the paper. So I had put them in the wrong order and matched with someone I had not really wanted to match with, but he really liked me. So I walk into the restaurant with him because I'm the kind of person who doesn't like to hurt people's feelings. So I was like, all right, I'm going to continue and go on this date even though I don't remember even the conversation I had with him at the speed dating. So we sit at the table. Now it's really that uncomfortable, like trying to have the get to feel you, know you conversations. And so we start talking. The waitress, Samantha, comes over and introduces herself and says, can I get your drink order and all that stuff? Do the normal things. She gets her drink order, her food order, and then we go back to like the conversation. So conversation starts with us talking about ourselves, where we've grown up, where we went to school. I said, oh, I went to the University of Kansas and Virginia Tech. I have a degree in interior design that I don't use anymore because now I have a master's in Jewish education. And he said, oh, well, that's cool. I'm on my second career too. I'm now working in finance. I got a degree from Temple University. I was like, oh, that's really great. My dad used to be the department chair, the accounting department at Temple. I know it really well. And he's like, oh, great. Well, he's like, well, it's a second career. I like it and everything. But beforehand, I was in the Navy. And I said, oh, that's really cool. Tell me a little bit about that. Really, like, that's amazing that you supported our country. And he's like, well, I didn't really pass basic training. And I said, well, what do you mean? How, like, what happened? Well, you see, I don't know how to swim. And I said, you decided to join the Navy. You'd think you might know how to swim. And he then went on to tell me a little bit more about the fact not only does he not know how to swim, but he's actually scared of the ocean. And I said, I don't understand exactly, but okay. And he said, well, I wanted to work in the boat, not on top of the boat or outside of the boat. I wanted to work in the boat, and I figured it would not be that big a deal. And I said, well, I love swimming. I swam competitively for 13 years. I can't imagine being afraid of the water. So we're going on, we're having our conversations a little bit more, and now we're talking about food. And I'm a pretty adventurous eater. So he's like, what's your favorite food? I say sushi. I could eat sushi every day, all day. And so he's like, ugh, fish. from the water in the ocean that I don't want to go in. And I was like, okay, cool, yeah, so what's your favorite food? And he's like, I'll tell you, but I think you should guess. I said, okay. And I sat in silence because I didn't really think he was going to make me guess, but he did. So he goes, you want to guess? I said, oh, I guess so. Can you give me a hint? Because a lot of food in the world, right? So he goes, my favorite food starts with a G. Okay, so now all of you are thinking about foods with G's. Lots of things are coming to your mind. Blank. My mind is blank. Nothing comes to my mind except for a word that starts with a silent G. Gnocchi. That is what I can think of. So I say to him, gnocchi must be your favorite food. He looks at me, he's like, nope. Silence. Do you still want me to guess? Yes. Okay, could I have another hint? It's between a turkey and a duck. Goose? He's like, yeah, goose is my favorite food. I had it once when I was in Israel. He's never eaten it again, but it was his favorite food. And I was going, okay, this is interesting. I'm not sure where this is going to go. I'm kind of thinking maybe we should, ed out. Samantha comes back to the table, checks on her drinks, all those things. Goes away again, and he comes back. We come back, we're talking some more. I was like, all right, let's talk about cooking a little bit more. I want to dig into this a little bit more. So I said, what food do you like to prepare? Oh, well, I don't really cook that much. My parents live around the corner from me, and I go to their house once or twice a week, and I bring home leftovers, and I just use the microwave and heat them up. And I said, oh, well, I love to cook, and I love to entertain. And he's like, yeah, I tried it a couple of times. The recipes, they can be really confusing. They have all those fractions and things in them, and I'm not really good at the math thing. And I'm going, wait, you told me you're in finance, but you don't like math. That doesn't make any sense either. And I'm like, okay, I really maybe we should start wrapping this up. It's been a long time. The date has gone on now, past the amount of time that really should. So we're talking a little bit more about cars. And asked me what kind of car I drive. I tell him, I think at that point in my life I was driving a Honda Pilot, and he's like, oh, well, I drive a Toyota, but I'm actually going to get a smart car. And I said, oh, that's pretty cool. That's really environmental of you. It's a little too small for me, but I totally get it. You want to be environmental. And he says, well, that's not really the reason I'm getting it. I'm not really that environmental. I just don't know how to parallel park. And I said, wow, I could teach you because I've taught all my friends' children how to parallel park in Los Angeles. I used to take them every time they get their driver's license to In-N-Out by our place, and the only parking there was parallel. So they had to parallel park. And then I was like, wait, I just offered to teach them to parallel park. That was probably not a good idea. Anyway, so I get up from the table now. I walk towards the bathrooms, and I go to find Samantha. And I say to Samantha, dear God, why have you not brought the check? And she goes, he's waved me off 3 times, which I didn't notice. So I was like, okay, I'm going to the bathroom. Your mission is to put the check on the table while I am in the bathroom. So I come back, thank goodness, the check is on the table. I start wrapping things up. And we were walking to my car. And he walks me to the car. He's a very nice gentleman. And I realized he's about to go in for a kiss. And I was like, well, that is not happening. So I open the door, I do a quick duck in, I close the door, and I wave goodbye. So now, before all of that in the bathroom, I had texted some friends to be like, I have to tell you about this date I'm on. Where are you guys? What are you doing? So I get in the car, my phone vibrates, I look down. My friends happen to be out at dinner at a restaurant 2 doors down from where I'm at. So get in my car, I start the car, I pull out of the spot, I go around the block, make sure that he's gone, I park my car, I walk myself into the restaurant, go to tell my friends about this fabulous evening, have a good drink, and laugh about it all the way home.
Isn't it amazing, the breadth of stories? We have 5, and the other 2 that are coming, and we have 5 people that are completely different stories. There's like, they have themes, but they're just completely different. We're covering the full breadth of the human experience tonight, which is so cool. All right, so this next story, I just want to give a little content warning. There is going to be a mention of gun violence in this wonderful story from Jeff Tauger. So if gun violence is something that you are not able to hear a story about, you should take your leave and we'll come get you later, right after. Up next, we have Jeff Tauger.
This raises, right? No, that,
Is that okay?
yeah, I may have to go Chuck Schumer on this. So.
Do you want it higher? No? Okay, sorry.
This is a story about tragedy, ason in Hebrew, repair the world, tikkun olam, and charity, tzedakah. 13 years ago, I had been a clinical social worker working for about 30 years. I was working at a human services agency in Connecticut, and the job had become routine. I was beginning to burn out. As most healthcare providers are experiencing now, it had become more about treating the chart rather than treating the client. I was longing to do something that made a bigger difference, and my experience that I had had in many jobs, earlier in my career, I had been trained in critical incident stress debriefing to work with people after a tragedy. On Friday, December 12, 2012, I had the day off and I was home watching the news. Around 1 p.m., I learned of the horrific shooting at Sandy Hook. It was about 18 miles from my house. I decided to go to do something, either as a social worker or a photographer. I decided to leave my camera at home, grabbed a wallet copy of my professional license, and jumped into my car. On the way up, I was listening to news radio to the story unfolding, and it was getting worse by the minute. When I arrived at Sandy Hook, I made it past the police checkpoints and was directed to the firehouse. Someone led me into the conference room where there were about 50 people sitting in a circle on folding chairs. The room was silent, no TV, no radio. Politicians and law enforcement personnel were up front. Finally, Governor Malloy began to speak. He said that some of the victims had been taken to Danbury Hospital. It was only later that we learned that it was only 2 people and they had died there. Malloy continued to speak slowly as if trying to avoid the inevitable. Suddenly, one of the mothers jumped up and said, "Where are the other children?" He hesitated and then replied, "They're still in the school." The room melted down in screams of anguish. I was stunned. It felt like a bad dream. I had to step out. I couldn't talk. I called my wife Nancy, and I still couldn't speak. We learned later that 20 children, ages 6 and 7, and 6 adults had been killed, including the shooter's mother. The following day, I went back to Sandy Hook with another therapist who had been a professor of mine in grad school. We went to a nearby school which had been set up to provide a safe and welcoming space for parents, teachers, and kids. This part is about tikkun olam and tzedakah. Counseling, food, and hundreds of stuffed toys were there. People from around the country called local restaurants, said, "Here's my credit card, send over food." And then there was the unconditional love of comfort dogs brought by Lutheran Church Charities from Chicago in a van. They brought their specially trained dogs to help bring warmth, kindness, and a listening ear. Children and parents came to see the dogs. Some would start crying, some would be sad at first, and then they would smile as they petted the dogs. A little boy started telling one of the dogs what he saw happen in his school the other day. Listening to this, the boy's parent told the dog's handler, "He hasn't shared that with me." That night, I went home and told some friends on the phone and by email, including people I know overseas, what I had experienced. We discussed that since the shooting at Columbine High School in April 1999, there have been 222 fatalities and 351 injuries in mass shootings at schools alone. Some were incredulous and said, "Jeff, what the hell is wrong with your country?" I knew the answer, but at the same time, I didn't. This is dedicated to the children and parents and friends and the first responders at Sandy Hook.
Thank you, Jeff. All right, Cantor Katrina is getting our next speaker. For our last story tonight, in this what has been a really beautiful evening, we have the one and only, when she's ready and has her water, Bernie Vagnini.
Yes, okay, you can hear me. The first of Adar 5784. That's February 10th, 2024. I woke up in the most excruciating pain of my life. My head felt like it was going to explode. I couldn't open my eyes because light suddenly burned. I could no longer move the right side of my body. By the time that DJ, my husband, had driven me to the hospital, I was curled up on the left side of my wheelchair, unable to sit up or speak. I had had a stroke. I lost use of my legs, my right arm, my neck, and my eyes. Unable to speak, move, or see, I felt like I was being held hostage inside my own body. At that moment, I started crying. I felt so bad for myself and asked why the worst things always seemed to happen to me. Then I realized it was not the worst thing in the world. I am being held hostage in my body, but I have medical care, a bed, and a loving husband helping me through all of this. I thought about the hostages in Gaza in that moment, and I prayed for them instead, and I felt the same God protecting all of us. Baruch atah Adonai matir asurim. Blessed are you, God, that frees the captive. Adar 2. Leaving the hospital was a struggle. I had to lay motionless in a dark, quiet room because any sensory input would cause pain. It was during this time that I found out that T.I. would be doing a Taylor Swift Purim spiel. So I had 43 days to get back to normal and celebrate Purim. Super simple, right? Like, can totally do this. That was my goal, to go to Purim Fest. I began to be able to listen to things quietly. So I listened to the Megillah on repeat over and over and over again. My mantra became, be brave like Esther, and that is what I repeated to myself. If her bravery can save our people, my bravery can save me. The 14th of Adar 2. I was able to make it to Purim Fest. I was in a wheelchair, an intense arm brace, and like a C-collar. Do I remember it? No. Did I have a lot of fun? I hope so. I don't actually know. Were the groggers absolutely awful? Yes. Nissan, March. My hearing was the first part of my body that started to heal. With my hearing functional, I decided to listen to the entire Torah on audiobook. That is what calmed me. I also met with Rabbi NB and asked her no less than 10,000 questions during this time. There is an email out there entitled, "Here is every question I have on Genesis. Can you answer all of them for me?" And it's like 500 questions. So I listened to the story of our people, the struggles of our people, and I felt connected through the struggle. ER, April. I began being able to open my eyes without light, making me want to scream. For months, I had been living in a room with blackout curtains and blindfolding myself. The first and only lights I allowed in my room for months were Shabbat candles. Even though the candles hurt just a bit, I felt the light from the candles blanketing over me and protecting me from harm. I felt God was with me as I fell asleep with a sense of safety that only Shabbat could bring. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam pokei ark ivrim. Praise to you, Adonai, our God, sovereign of the universe, who opens the eyes of the blind. Year continued. I started physical therapy and struggled physically and mentally. Physically, everything hurt, but mentally, I was mourning who I was. I had no idea what was going to happen to me or if anything would ever get better. And all of a sudden, there was just an overwhelming focus of everything my body could no longer do. During this time, I began picking out my Hebrew name. So instead of being depressed about what happened to Bernie and what Bernie couldn't do, I focused on what Eliana might be able to do. The first time I tried doing physical therapy as Eliana, it became easier. I hung on to that for all 47 weeks in physical therapy. Having a Jewish name and feeling connected to the tribe made me feel less alone. You meant the Torah for me. Did you mean the struggle too? Don't let me struggle alone. Don't let me struggle alone. I was no longer struggling alone. I no longer felt that. July. For those of you who haven't known me too long, I was in a wheelchair semi-permanently for 6 years prior to my stroke, long before I came to TI. So what happened next was a miracle. I gained the ability to walk. It started off slow, then I slowly graduated to a walker. From the walker, I was able to start walking on my own 2 feet without any assistive devices. I was able to walk again. I became stronger and stronger and have not used a wheelchair in over 7 months. Eliana had done it. I had done it. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamakein mitzadei gaver. Praise to you, Adonai, our God, sovereign of the universe, who strengthens our steps. The 7th of Elul, the day of my Beit Din and Mikvah, a day I never thought would come. I had worked so hard. Eliana had worked so hard. As I felt the mikvah bath around me, I felt the same feeling I felt with the Shabbat candles, blanketed in safety. It was an amazing feeling as I felt myself becoming Jewish in every way. Adar 5786. I was so excited for Purim this year. I made the joke that it couldn't possibly be worse than last year, right? I was so excited to dress up and eat hamantaschen and experience the things I missed last year. Plus, Wicked Spiel, who doesn't want that? What I didn't expect was that I was going to cry hysterically. My brain was processing the fear I had felt of not living long enough to celebrate Purim last year, and I had made it and was now alive for 2 full Purims. The 1st of Adar might be the anniversary of my stroke, but Purim is the anniversary of my survival. So here I stand, a fully converted Jew as of the 7th of Elul, Eliana Esther. Eliana because it means my God has answered me, because every time I've cried out, God was there, and Judaism was there. And Esther because I was brave like Esther the entire time. Baruch atah Adonai melech hamatein ve'baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'asani Yisrael. Blessed are you, God, who revives the dead, and praise to you, Adonai, our God, sovereign of the universe, who has made me a Jew.
Wow, that was an incredible story to end on. Let's hear it for Bernie and for all of the storytellers. Wow. Thank you all. That was so beautiful. All of these stories were so amazing. I really had the best time. I'm so moved. I'm so moved by that story. I hope you all are so inspired by tonight, and I hope you all go out and either write something or paint something or bother someone else to go write or paint something. Just get a little more art in the world because it's so powerful. And thank you all. Have a great night.